How many of you work in a corporate environment? Very good. How many of you work in a highly matrix corporate environment? How many of you have a large IT organization? How many of you have business units that have IT folks that actually don't even belong to them, but are actually used for their IT purpose? Wonderful. So I just wanted to gauge the room to see how I'm going to speak to you guys, because this is addressing that very issue in people that work in very large organizations, how they don't get their IT needs met. So I'm Gordon Morantz. I'm a business technology partner for Disney, and I actually started my data career in oil and gas for about 10 and a half years. And we used to take data and cull through it and determine how long it would take for a piece of equipment to break down, the mean time between failure. And we also used to take that data and find out where we would want to drill for oil. So I started that career in Houston, Texas. Anybody from Houston? Bangkok, Thailand? Really? Fantastic. My original career actually started in manufacturing women's apparel. That's another story. I ended up at Disney through the course of some fortuitous events. And I started in data and ended in data. So, but that's not what I did in between, and we're not going to talk about that. The second gentleman that we're going to introduce to you later is Micah Wood, who is our partner in crime and helping us craft this solution. And he'll go into detail, technical detail, of how we did so. So I didn't go into what BTP actually does. A business technology partner finds pain points. And it is my job to go to a business unit or a department and address pain points. Now, the majority of those pain points, 85% of the time, they're addressed with technology. And that's why I'm a technology partner. So I actually find solutions for people and departments and business units that can use technology. My primary focus right now is research, data, and analytics, which is why I'm here today, because I want to share the solution that we did for a certain group at Disney. 15% of the time, it's not a technology solution, but a workflow or people or process solution. So let's begin. Does anybody know the difference between a fairy tale and a fable? A fairy tale is for purely entertainment purposes, and a fable means that it's a story that has a moral. So we are going to share the Ingrid fable with you today. This is Patrick Pott. Now, he has a poor fashion sense, but he's a stand-up guy. He's a really good guy. He's a hard worker. He has a girlfriend named Wilma. He has adoring followers called the Misplaced Millennials. All in all, things are going really well for Patrick. He's a happy camper. The people at work even stopped making fun of him for his attire. However, Patrick is sad. So sad, in fact, that we had to use the sepia tone in this slide. And for those of you that argue that that's not sepia tone, you guys spend way too much on Instagram. But so Patrick is a media planner at a major entertainment company. And his job is to actually cull through mounds and mounds of data and do analysis. So he will gauge the effectiveness of our marketing campaigns for our television shows. If you don't know by now, I work for the direct-to-consumer line, and we launched Disney Plus yesterday. Cheap plug, sorry, had to do it. Thank you. Thank you. I had nothing to do with it, but thank you. Thank you. So it's Patrick's job to gauge the effectiveness of these campaigns. Like, how well did we do? Are we marketing them properly? When we post something up to the internet, did we destroy Netflix? Hint. So this aspect of his life is not very good, because in order for him to do that analysis, Patrick has to manually manipulate 50 megabyte files. And his only tool of choice is Excel, because that's all that he's been given. Every time he loads these files and tries to process them, it crashes his computer. And I don't know how typical this is of your business users, but a lot of the times they're stuck and they're in this quandary and unable to meet their needs. So he's a sad, sad camper when it comes to work. However, Patrick has an epiphany. He decides to create a ticket with a help desk. They'll be able to meet his needs lickety-split. He wants a database created. Enter the help desk. So disregard the fact that our ticket accuracy and the intake of our tickets are really bad. It's because we have 8-year-olds manning the help desk. But aside from that, he actually gets his request in the queue. So it sits in the queue, and he's waiting for something to happen, but something never really happens for him. In the midst of this request, his business needs have changed. Because his request has been sitting there for so long, he now needs new data. And that data has to go through governance. And that means it involves oh, this is killing me. The suspense is killing me. It's not Tableau. Thank you. This woman. It involves this woman, Lion Tulip. I'm just going to go manual. Lion Tulip is in the data governance group, and because his data now has to go through this scrutiny, it must pass authorization from Lion Tulip and her group. The problem with that is that Patrick, I mean, look at him. Now, who dresses like this to work? Nobody's going to help this guy. Right? He's tried the help desk. He's got to go through data governance now. Ultimately, he gets deprioritized. And because the nature of his request is for one person, it's really low priority for the help desk. I mean, they're focusing on systems that have 500 users, right? They don't need to create this one database for this one guy. So ultimately, Patrick's request gets deprioritized. So enter the cosplay girl. I don't know if she's cosplay girl or, she is the procurement fairy. She's Drabbledrum. So this is where Tableau comes in. Patrick gets this fabulous idea that, you know what, forget those guys. I'm going to go off and get Tableau on my own, and I'm going to self-service my needs. The problem with that is Patrick is not classified as a data person. He is a media analyst. So when he processes this request with the procurement fairy, she still can't do anything for him because it's not within his footprint, his computer footprint. So he has a hard time justifying purchasing a Tableau license for himself, aside from the fact that he doesn't have any money to buy it in the first place. In the midst of this, Commander Barb comes in, and he says, yeah, Patrick, I'm going to need those TPS reports. Yesterday. Yeah. So Patrick now has to get all the campaign numbers for last year to Commander Barb, the TPS reports, and he's got to do it fast. So, as a result, Patrick goes quail hunting. Kidding, it's a call to action. So what Patrick does is he manually does this through hook or crook, and he spends the next 8 or 10 hours manipulating those files in Excel and crashing his computer repeatedly, but in the end, he gets it done because again, Patrick is a stand-up guy. However, during the presentation with Commander Barb, yeah, he gets, looks like he has uncontrollable flatulence right here. But that's not what it is. They're not making fun of him. It is that the numbers were scrutinized and they don't believe that they match. So what does Patrick have to do now? Because it's a manual process, Patrick has to go back and prove to Commander Barb that these numbers actually match. So again, he spends the next 6 hours, because he's streamlined part of his process, and he proves that the numbers are correct. But in the end, he's highly frustrated. So what do we know about this? We know that Patrick is a similar use case. How many of you are familiar with this use case? How many users that you have like that? Very good. It's a common occurrence. Let's take a deeper look at Patrick. What do we know about him? We know that Patrick has an existing process, albeit manual. He has control over all aspects of his data because he's the source of truth for that data. We know that he's limited in the tools and technology that he can use, Excel. We also know that there are no other downstream impacts to the data that he generates and the analysis that he provides. So we also know, because he had to provide all of last year's data, that he has to maintain historical reference. And then the last thing is, Patrick hates his process, so he wants to automate it. So that's what we know. Why is Patrick's story interesting? Because it happens to everybody. It happens to all of us. So many of us are encountering these same hurdles and limitations. So the first one is he's limited to using Excel. He does not have the tools at his disposal that he should be using. He has a undesirable process in which he has to go into a help desk queue and hope that somebody will service him. He's also having to endure long wait times for any kind of approval for additional tools like Tableau. That's probably still in HR's queue, and they don't even know what he's talking about. He has inaccessibility to wider tools and wider data sets. And there's a lack of an audit trail because of his manual process. And it's because it's manual, it's ridden to a lot of error. So let's take that scenario a little bit differently. And let's say we gave all these tools and advantages to Patrick. How would that play out? So you all know the story of Patrick. He's a stand-up guy. Commander Barb walks into his office and demands the TPS reports. Patrick looks at his computer, and with a few mouse clicks, he's able to produce that analysis. And Patrick is victorious. So what do we know from that story? What's the moral of this story, that second use case? Albeit that was short and boring. What's the moral? The moral of the story is be boring. Right? That's a joke. It's not. The moral of the story is there are different ways to attack this beast. And I'm going to introduce Micah Wood now. And if you please give him a round of applause. He will help describe how we tackled that beast.
Testing, perfect. Thank you, Gordon, for possibly the weirdest fable I have ever heard in my entire life. So as Gordon mentioned, my name is Micah Wood. I've been working with Gordon for about 2.5 years now, on and off in the capacity on this Ingrid project that we're discussing today. Ingrid, just to set the precedence here, is the technology solution and platform that we're going to discuss as it relates to the Patrick Pot fable. Before I do that, though, I just want to set the tone. So we'll dive into the architecture, but what I want to call out first is that the concept of Ingrid was born from what we see as an apparent misalignment between a traditional analytics process and the modern data volumes, varieties, and velocities, aka big data, right? What has worked historically, the shadow IT, the silos, no longer works, right? People have run business out of Excel for years, my own included. It's getting to a point where it's no longer technically feasible. And so people are running into the scenarios where they're chunking up 50 megabyte files into 1 megabyte files and aggregating into a pivot table, writing down an answer, and then doing it 175 times to finally get your answer, right? It's not sustainable, it's doable, but there's a limit, right? So having said that, what I want to call out is to acknowledge this particular truth, right? There are two types of data that we're going to discuss today, and they have two very different needs. The first is strategic, or you'll often hear it referred to as enterprise data. That is data that is kind of the overarching data that supplies that structures the goals of your organization, right? Your top line revenue, your customer, your employee diversity, whatever kind of strategic initiative you're running, this is the analytics that helps supply it. Think of it as like your core SOX compliance systems, things like that. On the other side of the spectrum, there's the tactical data. This is the data that supports the day-to-day operations that move you towards that strategic goal. And this is the type of stuff that we saw Patrick Pott having to deal with. His media planning purchases weren't necessarily strategic. They didn't have 75 different stakeholders or business units involved in them. It was specific to him and his domain. So we have to acknowledge first that different data has different needs. And I want to explain this a little bit further with an analogy. I'm sure most of us, I didn't turn around to look at the hand count, but I imagine most people raised their hands when they said they worked in an enterprise organization, or at least an organization of some kind. Modern organizational design has kind of this structure to it. When you have a customer, the business functions that are closest to the customer-adjacent business functions, operate in more of a decentralized structure. They're highly autonomous. Their value proposition is speed of reaction, speed to respond to customers, et cetera. They need the decentralization, that autonomy, that authority making decisions to react quickly to support their business functions. The further you move away from the customer, the more centralized or hierarchical the structure becomes. Think of your legal, your HR, your finance, right? These are not customer adjacent. They are highly compliant, regulated roles that serve a bunch of business units across the company. So let's complete the analogy. Let's take that into the modern data ecosystem, right? Replace customer with business user. Replace your centralized org structure, your legal, your HR, with your enterprise data warehouses, your enterprise data lakes. And that's it, right? What's on the other side of the spectrum? What's the analogous decentralized solution? Well, for years, it's been shadow IT. Everyone talks about the silos of an access database somewhere off in the wilderness, right? Or some process that one guy knows how to do on an Excel and 75 VBA lines of code, right? What's become clear in a modern data world is that is a gap, right? There is no standardized solution for addressing these tactical decentralized needs. And this is where Ingrid comes in. Ingrid stands for Next Generation Reporting Data, real original, I know, but it's Gordon's, what's it?
I have a little backstory about that. It was an inherited name. I hated the name. I name all of our programs and projects after Disney characters. Ingrid is actually a character in one of our television shows called Once Upon a Time. She is the aunt of Anna and Elsa, and she is a hero and anti-hero. So much like data can be good and bad, that's why it was appropriately named Ingrid, because depending upon how you manipulate that data or interpret it, it can be good or bad, much like the character. Boy, that was really deep for a project name. Sorry.
So there you have it, our beloved Ingrid name. We'll talk about it in a moment, but this is what we call our coordinated silo architecture. It is the analogous technical solution in a modern data ecosystem to the decentralized org structure, if you will.
I have an example for how we've used decentralized and centralized. So in our television show analyses, we have an enterprise data structure and data team that works on collecting all the Nielsen ratings. And that is an enterprise-wide initiative. And then we have specific groups that want to tap into that data, but yet their data is this much of what they want to focus on, not the entirety of all the Nielsen ratings and all of the other metadata behind it. So we were able to create, and we'll actually talk about this solution later, for one of our research groups, where we could actually capitalize on both and move the efforts forward on both. So the enterprise Nielsen data lake that we're still working on is still moving forward, but yet we're able to tap into that data and use the focused data for that specific research group using Ingrid.
Thank you, Gordon. One last point on this before I jump to the next slide and really dive into the meat, right? Both of these things are important. If you try and build an organization that's every business function is highly governed, highly centralized, fails. If you go the other opposite end of the spectrum and everyone can do whatever the heck they want, fails, right? The point is not to necessarily compromise or meet in the middle, it's to optimize both. The functions that make sense to be centralized are. The functions that make sense to be decentralized are. You don't want to mix as much as possible, you want to optimize, right? So let's jump to Ingrid. Ingrid, for lack of a better term, it's a data platform. It's actually built, it's a serverless architecture built on AWS. It's a custom portal UI that uses Tableau's API for all of its content. Right? We embed the reports and iframes, permissions are all passed through, et cetera, but we wanted to build something that was familiar to the existing consumer base. Anytime you try and introduce change, the slower you can make that change or the more baby steps you can go along the way, the more successful it will be. The folks we were working with had a very particular system that they were used to. So introducing the entire Tableau server UI was probably not going to be as productive as kind of throwing a skin on it and using the API to build something custom. So that's the background of it. But why this conversation is going on today is really what we call the architectural innovation of Ingrid, right? So far as it supports self-service analytics. And one thing I want to state outright is that none of the innovation that we're talking about today is that groundbreaking. What it is a collection of minor tweaks that we've made in response to what we've seen over hundreds of implementations. Me in particular, as a consultant, I see a lot of these implementations, and you take lessons learned. A little tweak here, a little tweak there, recognize the truths of the world, make those tweaks, and then together the holistic solution becomes what's innovative and what's much more powerful. So I want you to go into this with that lens. So the coordinated silo architecture, just for reference, I like to think of it as a data pool. It's a data lake with swim lanes. Basically, everybody gets to work in their own domain. You can kind of think of it as everyone has their own silo where they're masters of their domain, right? There are no downstream impacts. They control the data that goes in, that goes out, et cetera. It's more just a logical permissioning structure behind the scenes. There's a lot of AWS services behind the scenes on this that make it happen, but that's the idea. And just at a very high level, on the right-hand side here, you'll see, yeah, that's the right-hand side. You'll see the conceptual architecture. What we have is a business unit, use case, data set structure. Simple as possible. Business unit, permissions, a group of people that have the same rights to see things and create content as anyone else in their group. That's like the research you'll see there on the left. That's just a group of people. A use case is a tactical analytics process that somebody does in their day-to-day life. So Patrick Pott had to answer a question about media spend over the past year, right? That's something that's very tactical, impacts him and maybe one other person. That's what we call a use case. And then data sets are the sources of data that supply the data for that use case, right? There can be one per use case, there can be 10, there can be 15, there can be any number of data sources that are supplying a use case. So that's just the general structure. And we want to talk about these 5 bullets, which are kind of the innovation that comes along with it. So the first one is not even a technological innovation. We call it an inverted data lake, right? Most data lakes are designed with acquiring a bunch of data, and then it'll be used for a very small amount of use cases. There's a lot of excess waste there. We said, all right, let's flip it on the head, the inverted piece. Let's just go with a small amount of data that serves a lot of different use cases. It's the, instead of the, if you build it, they will come mindset, it's the we will come because we built it. Everything that we're putting into this platform is a use case that is already being done today.
Did you just reference Field of Dreams?
I did indeed, yeah.
That is not a Disney property. Okay. Yet. Thank you. Thank you.
I see we have a couple Disney folks in the audience. Nice, nice. So this purely is an innovation in just prioritization, right? Flip the script on the mindset that anyone's had up until now and say, rather than driving the backlog from what might be used someday for some business process, let's just say we're only going to incorporate data that is actively being used today or will immediately be used. Nothing groundbreaking, right? The second one, preventing the Wild West. What I mean by that is we built a file-based system, right? We don't want to build an architecture that an end user can't understand. And we don't want them to provide business users in a true self-service nature to break the system as soon as they start using it, right? They build out a use case, and then tomorrow it breaks, it's totally useless, and there's no point to it. So what we did is we had to build an architecture that could allow for multiple different business users to potentially upload the same file or the same data at different times. So you have an asynchronous component there, you have a multi-tenant environment. It's all really one client, but it's multiple users in the same use case. And the way we said, okay, let's take a step back from what we're seeing in most architectures, which is getting away from files, right? I want streaming architectures or whatever the trend of the day is. And let's go back to what people are familiar with. Let's design an architecture from the business user's perspective. And what do business users know? Files. Everyone has worked with an Excel, a CSV. They know how to relate to them and they know how to use them. So anything we do will be file-based. I'm not going to ask them to update records and track late arriving data, things like that. Just back out a file and re-upload it again.
So a real use case is, so Patrick Pott aside, we actually have file-based manipulation everywhere throughout the company. One of the specific areas is research, again. They Nielsen website on a daily basis, sometimes hourly, and download data to a file and then ingest it for computation and analysis. File-based.
So the third bullet, storage, is just recognizing a truth of the cloud, right? Storage is now cheaper relatively compared to compute. 20 years ago, not the case. It's actually one of the reasons why data modeling was invented, is so you could minimize the amount of storage you used and allow the compute to propagate those values where it was less expensive. What that leads to is really complicated entity relationship diagrams, star schemas, slowly changing dimensions, et cetera, that no business user in their right mind should be expected to really understand. So we said, cool, let's take advantage of the cloud innovations. Let's get rid of data modeling. This goes right back to the file-based approach. Go to a fully denormalized structure. Everything is table-based, one dashboard supported by one table type of a mindset, because every business user, when you break down a single column that repeats the value 100 times, the cost of that, even in the extremes, is negligible. What gets costly is the time spent trying to explain what the data model means or the performance inefficiencies you get from trying to do joins across poorly optimized databases, right? So we said, let's get rid of that. Let's go with a fully denormalized architecture. Fourth bullet, zero tech debt architecture. This is purely, you'll notice on the conceptual diagram that there's nothing unfamiliar looking there. Anyone who's built a system has seen a file going into a landing zone where it's protected, does some sort of validation, passes validation, moves into its permanent data store, and then gets processed into a database, some sort of ETL process, and exposed via dashboard, right? That's pretty standard. The beauty of this architecture, because it's file-based and because it's a trigger-based ETL and validation approach, is that it doesn't matter how the file gets into its landing zone. Once it's in there, everything that you've built, any ETL, any validation, et cetera, continues to happen after the fact. So what this means is we can have a business user, we can build a solution that's supported by business users actually uploading a file. It's not that big of an effort to ask somebody once a week to go in and upload the latest file into whatever their analytics solution is. And they can continue to do that forever if they need to. But if IT says, you know what, it's really kind of a pain for me to ask my business users to go into the Nielsen portal, download 5 files each day, and then re-upload them to our system, let me just build an API feed between the two. As long as you format the output of that automation in the same format and land in the same place, every trigger, every ETL job, every visualization will continue to work after the fact. There's no throwaway work. It's a entirely decoupled system. And then the last piece is a new tool and reduced perception of change. So I already kind of briefly mentioned this on the skinning of the UI piece to minimize the appearance of change as we introduced this self-service concept to end users. But the main piece, and why we're here today, is the integration with Tableau. Tableau, giving them a much more powerful tool, kind of showed this group an art of the possible that really helps drive their desire to continue to use the platform. And I know Gordon has an example he wants to talk about here.
Easy example. So in our legacy reporting, let's say for accounting, we have a quarterly report that needs to be sorted 7 different ways. That today, in the traditional sense, we have to create 7 IT tickets to get that same report sorted 7 different ways. Using Tableau, we provide them a single dashboard where they can do that sort on their own and self-service their needs.
So again, there are 5 bullets on this page. There's a whole lot more to this. There's a whole automated validation, Lambda-based ETL S3 being spun up behind the scenes, actually automatically creating projects and permissions in Tableau. All this stuff happens behind the scenes through a UI. Happy to go into that at some point. We won't go into that today, but afterwards, if you want to find me for questions, can talk through all that as much as you see fit. But at a concept, what I just wanted to reiterate, nothing I just said is that extraordinary, right? It's little changes that together made a successful platform. So now that we've talked about a little bit more of the concepts behind it, I want to get into the value proposition, and we'll actually look at this from 3 lenses: business user, information technology, and information security. And I'll kick it to Gordon for the business user.
For the business user, it's very evident what advantages we have here. So there is no reliance on an external IT team or any governance. They are self-encapsulated where they own their own data and they are able to manipulate their own data. So it's the democratization of their data, right? So we want to put that into the hands of the end users. It is contradictory to what the typical enterprise structure of data is. So it's small seeds that you have to plant within business units so that they can understand the value of it. But the value proposition is the people that own the data and the source of truth for that data should maintain and control it and be able to manipulate it on their own.
Did you want to tie that back to the Patrick Potts story and some of the challenges you faced and just?
Not really, but okay. So we kind of went through this story with Patrick. It is a ridiculous story, but Patrick, he has all of these limitations, and I'm actually just let's do the number 3 bullet there. So forced to endure unnecessarily long wait times. It's because Patrick had to go through a data governance committee to add a small data set to his analysis. So being that we deployed Ingrid, he no longer has to do that because he can pull that data on his own and manipulate it. But he is also the source of that data. So adding this additional data and tapping into the enterprise structure, allows him to do so.
So one of the things too that, just to reiterate on that I want to call out is the long governance committee, right? Why are we even getting involved with the governance committee for this particular need? I don't need, for instance, for my tactical analytics process, my day-to-day activities, I don't need to align with the heads of 5 different departments on what the definition of a customer is, right? The types of questions you start experiencing when you get involved with that enterprise data warehouse that are very, very valid questions to ask for the larger strategic analytics processes. It's not necessary in the day-to-day, and we're trying to, by having this siloed architecture, but in a way that's coordinated, so they're all built the same way, You can look across all of them if you have the right admin privileges, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. You get all the value of a silo, meaning that you don't have to worry about downstream impacts. You don't have to get stuck in these governance lines because there is no one necessarily to govern except for yourself. You get all the value, and then you get additional benefits of kind of a overarching view where you can see across those. And I'll actually jump right into that with the second value proposition, right? Which answers the question of where do I focus my developers' time? So this is the information technologies viewpoint. Business users are a huge, huge, huge part of the Ingrid platform. IT has to be just as involved. You're not going to be successful if you're butting heads with IT, or between the heads of IT and business users. So I mentioned the concept of, I forgot my train of thought. Nice. Let's just jump into the bullets and it'll come right back. So less time spent firefighting or running the business. Basically, what this is saying is take the 80% of your workload that is as an IT person, you're supporting the business with like, I need it now requests. Hey, help me, the Patrick Pot request, right? Very likely that IT help desk could be escalated and prioritized and pulled in some developer who will have to spend time that is taken away from a larger strategic initiative. Maybe it's a Tableau server installation, right? There are other things that IT should be focusing on, and what we're trying to do is train, give folks the tools and train them on the platform on how to answer 80% of those questions on their own. So that extra 20% is really the only time that you involve IT. The second aspect ties to the automation piece that I mentioned a moment ago, right? More informed development backlog. So as IT, I'm getting requests from 10, 15 different business units with, hey, I need this data set, I need that data set, what are your thoughts on a Snowflake migration, whatever it may be, right? There are competing priorities all over the place, and I don't know how good your organizations are at reconciling those, but it usually is whoever shouts the loudest or has the larger paycheck wins that argument. What we're trying to inform here is, hey, as an admin view, because everyone has the same structure, you can start looking at usage across all of the groups and say, you know what, this Nielsen file is being uploaded every single day, and it's being consumed by 300 people. Why don't I prioritize that in my backlog and build them that API integration because I know it's being actively used and I know it's a problem for the business users. And I use problem loosely there because they're uploading a file. And then the last one to call it is the no more wasted effort. So this is talking about the Field of Dreams quote, right?
Not a Disney property, but will be.
If you build a data lake with a mindset of, I'm going to acquire every data set under the sun, and at some point, sometime, someone will use it, there's inherently a lot of waste in that. By just monitoring the usage of this platform and targeting your efforts, you will eliminate a significant chunk of that waste. The third kind of perspective that we bring to the table here, or that we evaluate the Ingrid platform on, is information security. Right? How does Ingrid help information security? This is primarily done with the answering the question, what's my data risk? So everyone in California has to deal with CCPA. We've all had to deal with GDPR, lots of data breaches, compliance issues, right? This is a thing that's not going away. A lot of data architectures were built before compliance was a huge thing. You had SOX, and that was kind of it. Right? So what we've found is, let's take a perceived weakness of the cloud, security, and let's turn it into a strength. Right? Everything that people are bringing into Ingrid was an offline process. We don't have visibility into the types of data that people potentially may be emailing around in an Excel file after they do some manipulation. We don't know what our data risk is for this. We don't even know how to monitor it, right? It's on someone's computer offline. By helping them, the business users push that process onto this platform, InfoSec gets some visibility into it. And there are actually some components that help identify PII and things like that. When you upload a file into the architecture, it'll trigger PII validation things and help secure the environment. Because I mentioned earlier, I don't want to immediately break something the next day. I also don't want to immediately have a compliance issue on my hands because I let somebody upload a file with social security numbers into the cloud. So what this does, and kind of what the dashboard on the right shows, is the business unit use case, source file hierarchy, and then down to the field level of different compliances. So I can quickly, as an admin, because again, everything's structured in the same way, goes to different Redshift instances behind the scenes, I can answer the question, what's my data risk? And actually, if you click into this dashboard, which we don't have a live demo of, you can identify the owner of that data set, and you can reach out to them and says, hey, I notice you have 4 fields in here that are classified as PII. Do you really need those in your analysis, or can we strip those out, or can we mask them on input? So it helps eliminate that component of data risk. So it turns what was an invisible process into a visible one, helps you actually address it. So let's see some examples of the use cases within Ingrid. Gordon, take it away.
So this is the Patrick Pot use case, right? It's fairly easy, single flat file, single user, very low complexity. It is literally the example. He's a media planner. Typically, Micah, how long does an engagement like this to actually deploy, develop, and fully implement?
So once we had the core architecture of the platform up and running, the use case onboarding is relatively simple, especially when you're dealing with like a single flat file. And this one's relatively low complexity. We didn't have to have any Python doing any parsing or anything like that. This one was actually just a few hours for the initial iteration, and then did a couple of iterative design changes. So overall, a couple days. But I mean, look at the output. It was 700 man hours saved per year because of that, no longer needing to have to do that manual pivot table after pivot table after pivot table in Excel for 52 files.
Okay.
What about a more complicated one?
So this one is a moderate use case example. We have deployed this system for ratings, for Nielsen ratings for the Disney channels. And what it involves is it's an actual portal where the folks can access all of the reports and Tableau reports without having to use a Tableau license. So it's a very nice, elegant solution using the Ingrid platform. We call it about medium complexity. So Micah, what t-shirt size would you gauge for implementing a solution like this?
Yeah, medium's got the widest range, or moderate, if you will, has the widest range kind of implementation times. But on the lower end of that spectrum, again, a lot of the times it depends on the ETL complexity involved. Most of the time it's not too bad. This one happened to be more iterations on the actual visual design because it was more of a channel guide experience as you scrolled through the dashboard, which is a little bit different than your normal Tableau dashboards. But this one was a couple weeks. I would venture to say that had we tried to do it without the Ingrid platform, it would be well in the order of months. This one actually allowed us, by the way, to retire an old server architecture.
Yes.
What about this version of a moderate dashboard?
Oh, the competitive grid. So this is a moderate dashboard used by our senior programming and scheduling and strategy people at ABC Network. What it allows them to do is look at all of the competitive schedules for all the competing networks, as well as some cable channels. What we want to do is expand this to online. With the launch of Disney Plus, it kind of makes sense. But this allows us to see in one holistic view what we're scheduling against in terms of our competitors. And the data is updated on an hourly to daily basis.
And just for reference, so you'll see the screenshots they only show a very, very small portion of the Ingrid UI. You'll notice this is an embedded iframe structure with a very simple top menu bar. If you click that back button that you see in the top left there, it actually gets into a custom search component of this, folder structure, actually the upload manager component. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes that, again, not going to share all that detail with you today, but that's just to kind of give a little background on where these are coming from. What about our most complex one so far, Gordon?
The most complex one is for research. So they take a lot of data from a lot of disparate sources, and they transform them. Today, they used to transform them manually. Today, they use Ingrid, where it's a very automated process where they can get a file and drop it into a queue, and it automatically creates these dashboards auto-magically.
Yeah, this one was interesting because just the sheer number of hours and effort that some of these folks were doing. I mean, every single day, there was a chunk of a group of analysts who would have to basically generate a report on how their show did the night before. And this is across, how many shows are in a given season?
We typically have about 20 to 25 shows.
20 to 25 shows.
Per network.
Per network, every single day, 5 days a week, actually 6 days a week. And each one of them took about an hour of manipulation to do. So there's a team of folks supporting this, and I venture to say it was probably the least favorite part of their job, because as everyone likes to do, they like to gain the insights and rather than do data wrangling for a living. So this one was really powerful, and it does save a lot of time now. So Gordon, what have we accomplished with all this?
We spent a whole lot of money.
Other than that?
we actually delivered something really nice and elegant for the business users where they can self-service themselves. We have introduced a multitude of tools to 500 users. We have reduced the time to delivery for any kind of reporting or any kind of new requests. We've trained a set of super users so that we can start to plant seeds and create this community of owning their own data. And we have been able to retire our legacy reporting portals, which were non-scalable.
And most importantly of all, delivered for the business.
Correct.
How big of an issue was this before, Ingrid?
This was a monumental issue in that every single system that we own from an application or system perspective has reports. The ability to create those reports into something dynamic where you can change them on the fly using Tableau, obviously, is a very large advantage.
Perfect. So what have we learned along the way? What advice would you give to folks in this room as they try to embark on this journey themselves?
So let's start with the first one. So the first thing is to make the tools accessible to your user community. So the Patrick Pott use case where he asked for a Tableau license and was unable to get it, try to circumvent that somehow with your management or through architecture like what we've done. So what we do is utilize a Tableau server where we are able to expose those visualizations through the server and through the portal where you don't have to own an actual Tableau license for your desktop. The second thing is support, technical support. So as we roll this out and as we start to plant seeds with super users in the user community, there's a lot of growing pains that we have to go through. And to get those people up to speed and to get them ramped up, we require tech people that understand data. We require data stewards. We require data analysts. So be prepared to fill those skill sets within your teams. And then I'll let you talk on that because you just love GIS and security.
So the other two really big lessons learned here, and again, these are kind of tips and tricks along the way. Data security, as I've mentioned, you can turn a perceived weakness into a strength by openly addressing head-on the components you're going to introduce into this architecture that help with data security, that address areas that also had no focus before. You get the buy-in from InfoSec much faster, right? And everyone knows InfoSec can kill a project or architecture if you really don't focus on the important things. So going in with your arguments around how this architecture helps address a previously unaddressable problem is really beneficial. And then the same thing with over-communicate. And what I mean by that is nobody wants to be told that what they've been doing for the past 20, 30 years is wrong. And what I mean by that is we talked about a centralized architecture earlier on and the value that a core enterprise data warehouse has. This communication, this over-communication is to say over and over and over again that that is still needed. Everything you're doing is great. Like, we definitely need these core enterprise data warehouses. They're vital to our organization. They serve strategic data perfectly. What we're saying now is that's not going to go away. We're going to introduce a complementary solution that focuses on a completely different type of data, the tactical data. And as soon as you get that message across around that there are two different types of data and that they have very different needs and thus warrant very different solutions, then you start to get the buy-in and you don't get the pushback from folks because they don't get fear of kind of taking over an existing architecture. And what's even more interesting on that is as it's matured over time, all these source files that maybe were offline files going into this coordinated silo architecture of Ingrid slowly get monitored by IT. They then slowly build out their backlog and build out the sources that should be the core source of truth for those files. Then they build the APIs that replace those. The business users stop uploading the files themselves, and you now have your core enterprise data warehouse supplying, or data lake, data warehouse, whatever you want to call it, supplying highly governed data into a self-governed environment, which can be shared across multiple business units, multiple business users, and over time you create this feedback loop where the entire architecture, the entire ecosystem becomes more reliable over time. But you're not waiting on one to do the other. So you've kind of decoupled that reliance on the long backlog times, the development of your IT team. They can keep doing it because that's great, it's needed, but you can get the business moving forward in the meantime.
So if we can impart to you a takeaway from today's fable, that's to think differently. So the accomplishment for the Ingrid project was really not huge technological innovations, but more of a feat of management. Here's a quote from the Apollo program. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but essentially what it is it's a triumph of your management and how you approach your solutions and how to address your issues. So now I'm going to, Mike, I'm going to need your help because I want to wake you guys up for your next session. I'm going to do Q&A for you. And if you answer the question properly, I will give you some Disney swag. How about that? All right, first question. Get your arms ready. So first arm is the winner.
I'm
right?
looking. All right. No, we're going to make it complicated. It'll be the third arm.
So what did, and it really it's not technical, so it's about the fable. So what did Commander Barb ask for?
Right here.
Campaign data.
Very good. Come up and get your Disney swag.
Well, we can wait till after because it's
Oh,
gonna be
okay.
hard to
So, all right.
walk around here.
All right.
Anyone who gets one right, come up after and we'll hands out some swag.
Very good.
Also, if you have questions too, we'll just grab us after the session. We'll be hanging around.
Okay, it's going to get tougher as we progress. What was the procurement fairy's name?
Right here.
She was the cosplay girl.
No. God, did I get too much pleasure telling you no? I'm so sorry. No.
She was. That just wasn't her name.
But that wasn't her name. She
You know her
was
name?
the cosplay girl, but that wasn't her name.
You said it
Anybody?
pretty quickly at the end there, Gordon.
No.
Close. No.
No. Data governance. No. Oh my gosh.
You
really?
did say it really quickly.
I did?
Yeah.
Should I give you guys a break? I'll give you a break. Her name was Dabbledrum because I said it really. We'll give it to you for cosplay girl.
Cosplay girl. I like
Or
that.
cosplay girl. All right. 3 more questions. So where did I start my data career? In what industry? Oh my
I
God.
think I was right here.
That is incorrect, sir. I feel like Alex Trebek.
I missed it. Sorry. You're Gordon.
Oh my gosh.
I got distracted by your Alex Trebek comment.
You're going to have to pick one because I have to be unbiased.
Let's go. Actually, I haven't been looking
My
too
data
much over
career,
here.
what did it start
in the maroon shirt, I believe. Yeah.
Very good. Come up and see. Where did I start my actual career?
I think it was you. Yeah, sorry.
No, it was actually him.
Yeah, actually, you can both get swag for that one. That's my judgment call.
Very good. So that concludes our Ingrid fable. I hope that we entertained you in some way, shape, or form. I kind of wanted to shake it up, and thank you for attending. I'm Gordon Morantz, and this is Michael Wood.